r/Askreddit by Reddit and chill. What's a fact you know that almost everyone is wrong about? That it's a good idea to make furniture out of old pallet wood. No. That stuff gets treated with all kinds of pesticides when shipped overseas, so you don't transfer any bugs or fungi. You don't want the gases emerging from it in your living room. I've even seen baby beds made from that shit. It's also really cheap wood and Splinter City. Leaning your head back is actually worse for a nosebleed. Classmate in early high school was prone to nosebleeds. When he noticed one coming on, he just pulled out a tissue and held it under his nose. One time, a teacher told him to tilt his head back and he just said, "If I do that, the blood will clog up my nose and I'll have to go to the doctors." Not sure if it's for most people, but the people I've come across had this wrong almost always. Canberra is the capital city of Australia, not Sydney. I just want to add that the outside of the Sydney Opera House is like little tiles and not big metal panels. Water isn't actually conductive. It's the impurities in the water that allows it to conduct electricity. My chemistry teacher told the class this and had some backlash. So he proved it. A heart attack and cardiac arrest are not the same thing. Some severe heart attacks can lead to cardiac arrest. However, there are many that experience heart attacks unknowingly and carry on their merry way. Cardiac arrest means your heart actually stopped right while serving on an airfield. I remember telling a non-aviation friend that there was a plane coming in about an hour from then. He said that was impossible because the tower is closed. I explained to him that flights come in all the time when the towers are closed. Even commercial jets are constantly landing without the tower being open. He absolutely blew up. Said I didn't know what I was talking about, and that planes would crash all the time if that were the case. How could planes land without a tower? That just makes no sense. I even got my superior officer on the phone the next day to explain it and he still wouldn't believe it. I had 3 other people under me explain it to him and he still wouldn't believe it. I told him, "Dude, it's really simple to prove. The tower hours are posted. Check the last time a flight lands for the night and I guarantee it will be after that time." He did. It was. And yet he still refused to believe me. The sad fact is, people would probably riot if they found this out, because they'd think it was horribly dangerous. But it's been standard operating procedure for decades now and no one has even noticed. It hasn't caused a single crash. Believe it or not, it's actually safer to come in after hours because of the reduced traffic. This is not something that needs fixing. It's a very logical move. But I'll bet there are even people reading this that won't believe it. Unless you work in aviation, you probably don't know any of this. And there are plenty of unnamed airfields with runway lights that you activate remotely by letting your radio at a certain frequency. Long Island iced teas do not have iced tea in them. Or Long Island. Conceiving twins is only genetic through women and that's only fraternal twins. Identical twins are completely random. A defibrillator will not restart a heart. It will only stop fibrillation. Edit. Holy fuck. Didn't expect that. What is fibrillation in this context? Because as a papermaker, fibrillation would be a weird thing to happen to hearts. This is really specific. But in most anatomy or biomechanics textbooks the ankle joint is classified as a second-class lever with the ball of the foot labeled as the fulcrum. This is incorrect as the system rotates about the ankle joint, not the ball of the foot. Therefore it is a first-class lever, not second. This right here is the hill I will die on. It's the heel you'll die on. Ostriches don't bury their heads in the ground. It would also take at least 2 people to duck one, regardless of its health. The Mayans didn't disappear or go extinct. They still live in Central America and speak at least 24 different Mayan languages. The last Mayan city didn't fall to Spanish conquest until 1697. Same for Aztecs. Nahuatl is still spoken in Mexico. Marie Antoinette never said "let them eat cake." The first written account of this story is from 1767 and doesn't attribute the quote to her. She would have been 12 at the time, and would go on to marry Louis V 3 years after this quote was initially published. The quote wasn't even about cake. It was about brioche. If you don't have a will, your spouse doesn't necessarily get your stuff. But the state doesn't take it all either. You don't have to pay gift taxes if you make a gift of over $15K. You just have to file a gift tax return. Revocable trusts don't change the taxation of your estate. Guess what I do for a living, lol? I'm guessing exotic dancer 0. Being schizophrenic does not mean you have multiple personalities. To add to this, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, schizoid personality disorder, and schizotypal personality disorder are fairly distinct from one another. Schizophrenia is a persistent disorder characterized by psychosis, hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, etc., whereas schizoaffective disorder is more intermittent with episodes of psychosis. Both of these are distinct from bipolar disorder with psychotic features and depression with psychotic features. Schizoid personality disorder is essentially someone who is very non-social to the point of having difficulty functioning or adjusting to change but is okay with that. And before you ask, no, not every neckbird or loner meets the criteria. Schizotypal personality disorder is someone who wants to be social but has odd behaviors, magical thinking, and other bizarre behaviors that often lead to difficulty with socialization. Also, multiple personalities, formerly dissociative identity disorder, is hotly debated as to what exactly defines it and whether it's even real. Most psychiatrists characterize it as a response to very severe trauma over a long period of time. The theory is that it is a defense mechanism during the trauma which enables the victim to survive by dissociating. Basically, when the trauma is happening, the victim opens a box, and when the train ends they close the box and they make it a separate part of themselves. Eventually, they are no longer in that situation and it becomes hard to keep fully separate and thus becomes maladaptive. The goal of treatment is to help the person recognize that these personalities are all aspects of their own self and to help integrate them into being one. Robin Williams didn't kill himself because he was depressed. He killed himself because he had Lewy body dementia, a degenerative brain disease. His autopsy showed that he had one of the worst cases ever seen. His wife has confirmed that he had about 50 symptoms, and depression was one of the least intense. His best friend, who has a name I can't possibly spell, Bobcat Goldthwait, has also confirmed it wasn't depression or substance abuse that caused him to commit suicide. Lewy body dementia, LBD, is a disease associated with abnormal deposits of a protein called alpha-synuclein in the brain. These deposits, called Lewy bodies, affect chemicals in the brain whose changes, in turn, can lead to problems with thinking, movement, behavior, and mood. MSG is a natural substance. If you say you're allergic to MSG, you're allergic to tomatoes and cabbage and all kinds of natural food. MSG is basically if people started calling salt sodium chloride to make it sound like a scary chemical, then started having allergic reactions to it. Diamonds can in fact be shattered with a hammer. There is a difference between how strong something is and how hard it is. Diamonds can't be scratched by another material, or cut. Edit. Guys, if you're going to post articles saying this is wrong, can you please read the article first? A lot of these are talking about materials that are hypothesized to be able to cut diamond but have never been tested because they haven't been found in the right chemical structure or in a large enough amount to actually make something to try it. You could totally be right, but the fact it's never actually scratched a diamond is kinda relevant. Edit 2. There is actually an artificial material that has been tested and is capable of cutting diamond. Diamond can only not be scratched by natural materials. Thanks to you / the house chef. Singers, almost universally, have a consistent tendency to sing slightly flat, not sharp. It's due primarily to lack of proper breath support and not because they have a tin ear for music. What is the proper breath support? Your hair and nails don't actually keep growing after you die. Your body just loses moisture and fluids, making your body dehydrate and shrink up. This gives the illusion that your fingernails and hair appear longer. And it's what made people believe in vampires or witches when they'd look at people that had been dead for days and saw their hair and nails grow. Dopamine isn't the pleasure chemical. You see the misconception all the time. Someone indulges in their favorite vice and says gotta get my dopamine rush. But dopamine isn't about pleasure. It's about craving. Our dopamine levels don't spike when we get something we want. They spike when something we want becomes available. And go down once we actually get the pleasurable thing. Dopamine isn't the rush of driving fast. It's the green light that tells you to go. That's also why drugs that work through dopamine tend to be more addictive. The pleasure chemical is a title that fits better for serotonin. But still, it's a massive simplification to think that the brain works with a chemical for pleasure, one for reward, etc. There are multiple chemicals involved. A spade is a flat shovel, not a pointed one. Edit. NM Wikipedia org link. Blame that one on card decks. Your flight isn't delayed because the tower says so. They blame it on us, air traffic control, because if the airlines admit the blame on themselves they may have to reimburse you. Edit. It's weather 90% of the time. Those lying bastards. The low man on the totem pole was actually the strongest in the Native American societies because he held up the rest of the tribe. But you still don't want to be that guy, which is the point of the saying. After living in Slovakia for 7.5 years, I got beyond frustrated when people would tell me that I would catch a cold from simply being in cold weather, or that air conditioning in the summer makes you sick, or that you treat a cold with antibiotics, or that sitting on cold concrete will give you hemorrhoids. I tried to refute all of this with actual evidence, but it fell upon deaf ears. I loved my time there. But good lord, the old health superstitions are alive and well. Don't forget, drinking anything with ice will make you sick. Source. Check in laws. Edit. To clarify, it's about the cold, not the ice itself. I know all too well about contaminated ice. I live in San Diego. Having a margarita in neighboring Tijuana can make for an interesting gastrointestinal experience. Einstein didn't fail math. Perhaps the legend is founded in the fact that the Swiss school system has a 6 as best grade and 1 as poorest, while the German is the other way round. Source and his matriculation certificate. He was a rebellious student and taught himself upper level math after becoming frustrated with his teachers. He isn't always was a genius. That the air in your bag of chips isn't oxygen but nitrogen so that your product doesn't stale. It also keeps them from breaking to an extent. The word helicopter is a combination of helico, spiral, and pter, one with wings. Edit. Most people assume the word breaks down into heli and copter without realizing those two words mean nothing in this connotation. OHH. So like the torrent pterodactyl. Today I learned. A monsoon isn't rain. It is a seasonal wind. Monsoon winds actually bring droughts at certain times of the year and rain in other parts. It's a monsoon outside is not a correct thing to say when it's pouring. It's pouring rain as if it were a monsoon season in a geographical location known for increased rain during monsoon winds out there. Porcupines can't throw their quills. But you can throw a porcupine. If you end up in a higher tax bracket, only the income above that bracket gets taxed at the new percentage. So say 0-60k is taxed at 1% and 60-80k is 2%. If I made 80k, only 20k is taxed at 2%. Picture a hymen. If you're thinking of a sort of sheet or membrane that covers the vagina and is popped by intercourse, you're wrong. It's actually a thin piece of tissue that only partly covers the entrance to your vagina. There are some cases where it does completely cover it. This is known as an imperforate hymen. Can cause some not insignificant health issues and is very rare. It doesn't always hurt when it breaks. It's as likely to be broken by accident long before you have sex as it is to be pristine when you do. And sometimes it just disappears by itself without breaking. Either way, despite the idea that it's some sort of foolproof virginity test, whatever you define virginity as. Anyway, it's still a pretty vague concept. It leaves a lot to be desired. That my mother was right. I am a super smart and handsome boy with cute dimples. I demand pics. For science. The definition of an introvert. Not all introverts hate people and never want to socialize. Being introverted just means that social interaction is physically and mentally draining. Compared to an extrovert, who gains energy through social interaction. We introverts still like to get out and have a good time and can genuinely enjoy it. It's just going to require some downtime after. Ducking like and subscribe.